Okay, welcome along to another lore video. This time, we're going to look at developments with the Stargoids, the Thargoids, the Far God Cult, and we've got some new logs to listen to, which I'll be playing later. A quick update, the Salvation video that plays when you log in is now gone as of the Thursday update, thanks to Commander Halpy, who was the first to tell me about this. Cheers, mate. The Stargoids, after following a fairly predictable path so far, went off piste a bit a few days ago when they started speeding up and going near none of the systems that people predicted they would. That's now settled down, and once again Cannon and others are able to track their distance and direction with consistency again. No one knows if this is a bug or something FDev threw in to keep us guessing, but following their trail is now back on, with the spreadsheets and the maps being updated. I'll link to both of those in the video, and you can follow those yourself. Whether it was a bug or something new being put in is unclear, but this Galnet article is talking about an upgrade to our FSS scanners. It's saying that a number of companies have been working on upgrading the FSS to make tracking the Stargoids easier. So far, nobody's noticed anything new about their FSS, so it could be a distance thing, or something that has yet to be discovered, or maybe something that even is yet to be implemented, and the Galnet article is just an advance warning of this. More as I know it. A CG ran for the pop princess, Aisling Targaryen, mother of Prismatics, who is setting up a charity for Empire victims of Thargoid attacks. And it was a side-by-side trade and combat CG standard setup, delivering goods or protecting deliveries, with liveries for the Dolphin, Orca and Beluga up for grabs as rewards on top of the cash. None of those are Empire ships, but presumably they are donations to the charity from Sal Kruger. The Feds, meanwhile, have gone full-on fascist and want to drag Far God Cult members into interrogation cells for lawful questioning. That's bring your own electrodes, waterboarding optional lawful. So a CG is now running in the Papontia system between the workers of Papontia Free. They're a faction that are helping the cult to outfit a megaship called the Dedicant for the cult to use, and a Federation-aligned faction, Papontia Incorporated, who are under orders from Hudson the T-1000 to arrest or kill all cult members and confiscate the ship. That's one reason to question the motives of the Feds here, but I don't think their primary interest is grabbing the ship for themselves. They can build more megaships whenever they want. Like all the superpowers, I just think they've got no real answer to the Thargoids, so like the Empire, they're doing the equivalent of turning inwards and contemplating their navals. In the case of the Feds, this means finding scapegoats amongst their own citizens, and I agree with Felicia Winters that this is about Hudson trying to look tough on the Thargoids by finding someone to blame. The Far God Cult are accused of espionage and working for the Thargoids, which is pretty bonkers even for the Fednecks. How could anyone be spying for the Thargoids or working with them when nobody knows how to even communicate with them? This is getting dangerously close to the thought police, which should be alarming to everyone. Being accused of treason just because someone else decides you might be thinking about it is just another way of circumventing due process and going back to the lynch mob. And it's never justified, even if the accusation turns out to be correct. And it's not the first time the Feds have picked on the cult either. They did it 4 years ago when they launched an investigation into the cult, and they were helped out by a reporter going undercover and living with the cult for a while. His recordings at the time satisfied the Feds that the cult were weird but not criminals. So picking on them again 4 years later just looks like victimization to cover the Feds' own incompetence. And worse, it could be pushing a peaceful cult into being a militant one. If they do become a militant cult, it will not be because the Feds are right, but because the Feds pushed them until they made it happen. It's not a self-fulfilling prophecy when you interfere, it's just interference. So obvious parallels can be drawn here. The previous attack on the cult by the Feds, the Marlinists being persecuted by the Empire, and once again people who are innocent till proven guilty being attacked on someone else's say-so. This time, there may be one reason why this accusation may not be entirely baseless, but as I say, that does not excuse preemptive behaviour like this, but I will come to the reason a bit later. This first apostle is now telling people that they are going to be saved rather than sacrificed to the Thargoids. That in itself isn't a completely new thing, because some of the Far God cult have always believed that they would be spared rather than destroyed by the Thargoids, but they were very fatalistic about it all the same. They just accepted what their fate would be, whether raptured or ruptured. But this time, they're fighting back. And that represents a definite change in Far God cult behaviour, which they've been pushed to by the Federation, who just seem to attack them every time they need someone to blame. And so, yeah, I'm once again thinking that this is the Feds just being crazy. Absolutely crazy. Lashing out impotently at an enemy that may not even be an enemy, but certainly will be by the time they're finished with them. So the Thargoids have withdrawn from the 3 systems they were attacking, and although the Feds tried to take the credit for driving them away, others are sceptical, with Galnet articles and the player base both advancing the theory that the attack and retreat were coordinated. And that level of coordination is not something we have seen from the Thargoids before. So as Commander Burr and others are saying, the Thargoids have never really used what we would recognise as tactics. Now for someone like me, who got into the lore by tracking the history of burning stations as part of my background research when I became the coordinator of the post-disaster evacuation service, this is mostly true, but the Thargoids have changed how they attack before. They've changed how they attack a few times actually, going from apparently random assaults to more targeted attacks on systems owned by AXI groups and Operation Ida, going from incursions that barely lasted the weekend to incursions that went on for weeks, from attacking 6 stations to attacking 3 stations, but those attacks being longer and harder, then 9 stations on New Year, a year or two ago, and getting as high as 24 stations on fire one week in the months leading up to the Proteus wave while Salvation was trying out his super weapon. This time round, none of the systems went into incursion, and the Thargoids appear to have retreated of their own volition, and no stations were attacked either. But beyond a few changes like that, it's fair to say that the basic method by which they attack hasn't really changed. Their behaviour has generally been more reactive than proactive, and they've not evolved very much that we could define from a human perspective as tactics, with any great levels of coordination, until now. Now, their attacks do seem to be a lot more synchronised and a lot more coordinated, and a lot closer to what we would interpret as some kind of tactical plan. Now why I find this interesting is because of a very old article, this one, going all the way back to October 3303, almost 5 years ago now, where a report by the now disgraced Admiral Tanner, yes him, made a number of claims. He said that the anti-Xeno missiles were becoming less effective against the Thargoids, as if they'd developed some kind of shielding or resistance to them, and they could no longer exert the hearts as effectively as they did when they were first introduced. In hindsight, we can now see this was because FDev then introduced Guardian weapons which were far more effective. He also claims the Thargoids have learned how to lock onto ships with countermeasures. Now I'm not sure what he means by this, since the only countermeasure I can think of in this context is the shutdown field neutralizer, and I don't even know if that was around then. It was a little bit before my time. And this may be an addition that FDev had planned to introduce that never happened, or it could be something else entirely. I really don't know what he might be referring to there. If you do, then please let me know in the comments. And finally, Tanner is saying that they have learned to dodge attacks more effectively, and their scouts have become more aggressive and accurate. And it's certainly true that the scouts are very aggressive and very hostile and instantly attack you even when the interceptors don't, and that's been true for a while now. All of which, Tanner said at the time, amounts to a race that can learn and adapt quickly as well. So maybe at one point FDev did intend for the Thargoids to adapt more than they actually have, and then for one reason or another it just never came to be. Since then there's been no real adaptation on the part of the Thargoids to anything much, until the Proteus wave, which they seem to have appropriated for themselves, the Grelics, which is a new development, and now these more coordinated attacks and retreats since the Proteus wave, which may represent a new tactic of testing our strength. And if that's true, then it's definitely something they've not tried before, or at least not tried like this, since you could argue that the previously heavier attacks were a more crude way of doing the same thing. But this is definitely a more measured way of doing it, and Thargoids being measured in their approach would seem to fit with what we, from our human perspective, would think of as tactics. In the Burr Pit, they go further, and the current theory in there is that the Thargoids are being led by D2, the woman who was the only success in salvation experiments to plug people into Thargoid ships, if you call being completely traumatised and having nightmares a success, of course. So they're saying that her experiences allowed her to tap into the Thargoid hive mind that gets speculated about in the Codex, and can perhaps actually influence and direct the Thargoids, essentially becoming queen of her own little hive. And also that she is the first apostle of this new breakaway sect of the Thargod cult. So the theory goes that she controlled them where they took over the Proteus wave, and she may be directing their attacks now. So perhaps this Federation witch hunt against the Thargod cult is with this knowledge in mind, which the feds haven't shared with anybody else. But it might answer the question, how the hell could anybody be spying for the Thargoids and working with them when we can't even communicate with them? As usual, I present these ideas for your consideration only, and my stance is the same as it always is. Everything is speculation until confirmed in-game by the devs or somewhere else official. But they are certainly all fun to think about. The last two items I want to look at today are, in my mind, related. One is the article which is looking at the possible reformation of Aegis, which came out today, led by Albertezro, who else, and making a point of saying it will address and show that it has learned from mistakes in the past, and also pointing out that it got unfairly called incompetent for losing the Alexandria when it was actually a direct act of sabotage by Azimuth, which is fair comment. I felt for a long time that no matter what we did, Aegis was set to fail, and this was confirmed a few weeks ago by FDev on one of their live streams, where they said that they thought players didn't like Aegis very much, so they wrote the downfall into the story. To me, this misread the room. There are some who hated and mistrusted Aegis, there are some who will always mistrust or hate anything just to be contrary, but the opinions of the vocal minority do not represent the player base, no matter how valid their reasons may or may not be. And most players I've ever spoken to have had a different point of view. Any distrust of superpower involvement has been a secondary issue, if it's been one at all, and their main beef with Aegis has just been simply that they've been around for ages, they're supposed to be supported and funded by the superpowers, and they really haven't achieved very much in the very long time that they've been given to do something. Yes, it's a two-way street and they haven't always had the help they need, but still in all, players have felt that they could have done more than they actually did when they had the chance. So perhaps this move to get them reinstated is an admission that they misjudged the situation, or perhaps it was an option they always left open for the story. But whatever the case, it could represent the start of an alternative to just fighting Thargoids all the time. And by itself, it might be no more than a talking point for the moment, if it hadn't come hot on the heels of the last item that I want to look at, and that is, while the various militaries are pretending to be doing something, there's increasing talk in Galnet of peace with the Thargoids, coupled with a strong suggestion that a reformed Aegis could be an important part of that. It's a very strong theme in a narrative at the moment, given the disaster of Salvation's attempts to end the war. So it's good to see a range of opinions and ideas being expressed through Galnet, and very fitting for a chapter called Aftermath. At least they are fleshing out the story, throwing us a few bones to look at, so I can't fault them for doing all they can to keep us interested in talking about things, despite the glacial pace of the more major events. Which brings us to this, an article that came out on Friday with some logs left by a popular content provider, where she interviews a member of a group who are advocating peace with the Thargoids. The logs are aimed at independent pilots, in other words, us. Anyone going to the beacon and scanning the logs will get free nameplates and decals for their ships, courtesy of a new movement called the Thargoid Advocacy Project, and this aims to raise public awareness of alternatives to war and get the superpowers to at least acknowledge the strength of public feeling about this and recognise it as a political issue that isn't going away. The beacon is in the Aiabiko system, it's a point of interest, and it has a telltale exploration symbol which lets you know that this is a lore-related item. Without further ado, here are the logs.
So you're into the tap stuff, aren't you?
Oh yeah, I believe it is a very impressive movement. The fact that so many people support a diplomatic solution to the war is really encouraging.
So how does Haimar Borchev get involved in that? I mean, on your show you shared your skepticism, I guess is the best way to put it, of how the Thargoid War has developed. You've covered failings by INRA, Aegis, and Azimuth, but the TAP thing has really appeared through social hubs, right? It comes from the people.
Well, okay, let me answer the initial question, okay? TAP, or the Thargoid Advocacy Project,
Right.
for people unfamiliar with the term.
I've been talking about it for a while now. My viewers are probably sick of it by now.
Well, let's hope not, because again, I have to say, it is really important, I think. The Thargoid Advocacy Project is, in my mind, the best chance we have for a diplomatic resolution to the war.
That'd be amazing. But would the soups even listen?
Well, systems within a superpower's domain, particularly the Empire and Federation, are very much governed with the idea that decisions are made on behalf of the people, even if that decision is unpopular. Well, the Proactive Detection Bureau is a good example of what I mean. Stellar factions withdrew from the Federation in protest at the PDB's deployment, and yet it still operates in the name of public safety. In the Alliance, where policymaking is a little more collaborative, the prospect of a military pact with Sirius Corp inspired the people of Riot to erupt in protest. And yet the pact was ratified anyway.
That Riort thing was such a wild ride. What was that guy's name?
Which guy?
The guy who organized the protest against Sirius?
Fergus Cassidy.
Cassidy, yes. He stood up to the biggest megacorp in the galaxy and got away with it. Like, imagine taking on Sirius Corporation with all its power and wealth and actually coming out on top.
Yeah, well, Cassidy harnessed the will of the people and drew the support of independent pilots.
Yeah.
And that leads back to my interest in TAP. More and more regular civilians are taking notice of the peace message and sharing it on ICE platforms.
Yeah.
Your media, Joy. My intended contribution is to bring that conversation to the mainstream news feeds and keep it there.
Like giving it some legitimacy, almost.
Yeah, well, not almost. Yes, in a manner of speaking, yes. I wouldn't say it like that because it suggests that non-mainstream media is somehow less important.
Sure.
Yeah, but we all have our uses, I suppose.
I totally get what you mean. I think that if we're being honest, the Xenopeace calls should be seen on Galnet. They should be on the Imperial Herald and on the Federal Times.
Yes.
Promoting peace and a diplomatic solution to a war which is now 5 years long shouldn't be restricted to independent journalists. It's why I'm speaking about it, and my viewers out there will shout it out when we've got a good message, and this is good. Peace is the answer.
Have you heard the recording from HIP 22460?
I have. It's such a sad sound. It's so mournful.
We don't know what made it. It is definitely Thargoid, but it does not match the noises from the Thargoid ships we have encountered so far.
So, some of my crew are convinced that something alive was used to power the Proteus wave weapon that Salvation built. I wouldn't put it past him. He was such a scumbag.
You are not a fan of Salvation's work,
Are
then?
you kidding me? Here, let's play this sound for everyone. Turn your volume up. Listen to this. That sounds like something's alive and in pain. Whatever Salvation tried to do, it hurt the Thargoids.
And then they reacted violently.
Right.
That is what I've been arguing on the Sovereign Network. We have been the aggressor in this conflict,
Exactly.
and the Thargoids are responding in kind. There must be a concerted effort to break the cycle of war, or both species are doomed to many more years of suffering.
All three superpowers covered it up, though. The sound was leaked by an unknown source, so we kind of have to ask ourselves why.
Well, there's a lot of money to be made from warfare, Joy. Federal and imperial navies always need ships, weapons, resources, new technology. Those far away from the front lines are making billions from this conflict.
But deliberately hiding this from us, this evidence that the Thargoids feel pain or even sadness, if that's what they did, and I'm not saying they definitely did, I'm just saying it doesn't look good, then we're being lied to. And I don't want to believe that they'd lied to us. It makes me feel icky or something.
Well, once again, the Thargoid Advocacy Project may change that. If our leaders try to convince the public that continued war is the only answer, they may be surprised by such strong calls for peace.
I hope so. Keep pushing for peace, crewmates.
Joy Senne.
Your crew? So, you have a ship?
Oh, no. Well, yes, actually, I do have a ship. It's a dolphin. She's a beauty. But I call my viewers my crew.
Okay,
Yeah.
I see. Yes, of course.
We're on a journey together. My crew have been with me since day one, through good times and not so good ones. In fact, we actually have a question sitting here with 187,000 askers. So let's see. Hymar, what do you think about the mysterious signals currently moving towards the core systems?
That is a good question. I find them fascinating. A mystery yet to be solved.
I know, right? I hope we can learn more about them soon.
Have you discussed them on your show before?
Let me tell you something. My crew has been tracking these things by the hour. We're so excited about what they could mean.
Well, your crew must have considered both the pros and cons of what these anomalies are. It would be very naive to expect a purely benevolent intent.
I get what you mean. Are you worried that they're dangerous?
Yes, I worry that we have invited danger to our space. Yes, I do. Our leaders have overseen a consistent level of antagonism towards anything non-human.
Do you think that they're Thargoid related?
Well, that is a popular theory, but currently we have no evidence to support it. All we know is that they are traveling towards our borders at a remarkable speed.
Yeah, the first one we found has a definite route. Like, it doesn't seem like it's a comet or anything. It's moving between systems.
Right, which indicates a level of intelligence or good programming, maybe.
Yeah.
But if we assume the former, and once again, we must not be naive in our thinking, if it is an intelligent source, then it means we must be very careful in how we greet it.
Yeah. If recent events are anything to go by, we'll probably try and form a battle fleet to go intercept it. I wish we'd try something else for once.
Yeah, which brings us back to the TAP idea.
Yeah.
We must petition our leaders on the local, stellar, and interstellar level.
Yeah.
Push every aspect of governance to explore diplomatic avenues with both the Thargoids and with these signals, if at all possible. Humanity has to trust the inherent compassion that has always guided it through periods of great strife.
I completely agree. So you heard the man, people. Get the message out there. We need an alternative to war, and it's time our voices were heard. But that's all the time we have for today. I've got an ICE convention tomorrow, so I need some sleep. It has been so fun. You're welcome back anytime, Mr. Borchev.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Joy. I've enjoyed talking to you and to everyone.
Great.
And remember to follow the Sovereign for independent news.
We'll be there. I'll be casting again soon, crewmates. Till then, I'm wishing you goodbye, good luck, and good times to come. Mwah!
Some people have claimed that these interviews give us more insight into the events of HIP 22460, but beyond an opinion that the Thargoid roar we heard was a roar of pain, which, though plausible, is still just an opinion, I don't think it really moves us on a lot in that regard, but nevertheless it is part of the ongoing peace narrative that is becoming a large part of this story and the Aftermath chapter in particular. All very altruistic and idealistic, and I approve of the message in general, but I'm sceptical about how much a podcast, no matter how popular, will sway the superpowers by itself. But as part of a more general public outcry about how those in charge are burying their heads in the sand and trying to shut people up rather than doing anything more productive, and the fact it hit Galnet could at some point lead to the third way that a lot of players want, with some breakthrough in communication or some information we can decipher to work out the Thargoid language, or some kind of movement in that direction. Interesting also that the guy in the interview says the assumption that the anomalies coming at us are Thargoid in origin is still an assumption. And another hint for me, or perhaps a hope, that we might find out more about both Thargoids and Guardians in the next phase when these things finally arrive. It does seem like the narrative is seeding us with the ideas that will be expanded on in due course, so all of these little stories are worth noting, even if we don't get the full significance of them yet. November is almost upon us, so the next few weeks could see things ramping up a bit. Stay tuned, and if there's anything you're looking into, you've discovered yourself, or think needs looking into, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.